All right, everybody. It says we're live, so let's pretend we are. Thank you so much for being here on a Monday night to discuss things that are happening and reasons that we should keep preparing and hopefully networking quite a bit as well. Thank you for being part of this community. I'm glad all of you are here because it makes everything easier for the rest of us when SHTF happens because I don't have to worry about you since you're prepared, right? So I see 5x5s coming in before they even should have. So thank you so much for that. I believe that was Mike H. So much appreciated. Exile Reviews, thanks for being here. Thanks for modding 5x5. And let's see here. We've got Welcome to My Life, Blaming the Ice Cream. So Jimmy of the Sea, 5x4. I'll take the 4. I think, we can work with that. And then we also have South Florida DCL. We've got 88 Karinutsa. Hi, Magic. Hello to you as well. So thanks for everyone for being here, and thank you if you're here on the replay. We are discussing the whole situation regarding running out of ammunition, and not just before SHTF in general for like us on an individual level, but as military organizations and countries around the world are struggling with ammunition supplies, I thought it would be good for us to kind of dive into that information and get some ideas about what we should expect here in the future, because it kind of gives you an idea as to where some of the countries are standing regarding their current stockpile, and it also lets us know what to anticipate when it comes to possible restrictions or regulations in the future, even for small arms munitions, because at a certain point, they're going to allocate things for what they need more so than what we need, of course. So this is something we definitely need to keep in mind. And as an individual, I definitely don't advocate anybody run out of ammunition before SHTF, but also don't let stockpiling ammunition keep you from training and actually using it, because it's a double-edged sword, right? You go out and you shoot a lot and you train, and that's good because you have skills, but then you have less ammo. So we have to have that balance, but it's still something that I think is very good to practice. Now, T-Rex says, do you have enough ammo? And I will tell you right now, I do not, because I do not have enough ammo to sustain the level of training and practice that I would like to keep up with. And that's just the honest truth. So I'm working on that. We'll see what I can do by getting some more, and maybe it'll get cheaper eventually, but I'm just not seeing that happen. So we do what we can with what we have, right? And of course, as much as everyone knows, like, oh, Magic Prepper hates 22 long rifle. And that's a skewed viewpoint, by the way. But either way, I have a lot of that, and I shoot it a lot right now because obviously there's a lot of, underground dwellers on the property that cause me issues, and it is more affordable and easier to shoot lots of. So, Prepper Now, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And anyone who has anything to add to the conversation tonight, make sure you do. We do have a poll that we started before the live stream tonight, asking which military organization is more likely to run out of ammo first. As of right now, everyone says the USA at 47% of the votes, 17% say Russia, we have 2% saying China, and then we have 33% saying NATO. And if you were to combine NATO and the US as they are a combined entity, that would actually put that all the way up to 80%. So a lot of people think that we're in trouble when it comes to our munitions supply, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So, and real quick, let's just bust it out and get out of the way. The channel's biggest supporter is Midway USA, and of course, they can get you covered in a lot of ways when it comes to ammunition. So keep that in mind, especially down the road if things become restricted or become more difficult to acquire thanks to some of these conflicts that we're witnessing. Midway USA always has my back, and I know they'll get you taken care of when it comes to that as well. So, what just happened recently here? Well, we have this guy who is at least seen as being the commander-in-chief, which I feel like would be a role you would be a little bit more, concerned about not being bad at. Biden let slip during interview U.S. low on artillery ammunition rounds as it tries to aid Ukraine, sparking backlash. We're low on it. So a lot of people are concerned about this, saying that Biden basically leaked state secrets in an interview because he's talking about our munition supply and how our military might not be as prepared as we like to propose to the rest of the world. So let's talk about this for a second, because this is just information that's coming out whether or not they meant for it to come out, which gives us some more things to consider down the road here. President Biden sat down for a recent interview in which he said the United States is low on 155 millimeter artillery ammunition rounds, sparking outrage and questions of competency from conservatives on social media. And it's my understanding that the 155 millimeter rounds are like howitzer rounds, right? So, what would that be, short range or medium range artillery? Either way, these are rounds that are being used quite a bit over in the conflict, and we're talking about how we're running out of them, which is probably not the best thing to let everybody know, but also gives us something to ponder here in the preparedness community, okay? During the interview, which aired Sunday morning, Biden defended his administration for sending cluster munitions to Ukraine, which we will talk about here in a minute, because that's something as well, as a transition period until more munitions are produced. This is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it, Biden told CNN's Fareed Zakaria. And so what I finally did, I took the recommendation of the Defense Department to not permanently, but to allow for this transition period while we get more 155 weapons, these shells for the Ukrainians. Reactions on social media ranged from confused to outraged as conservative pundits and experts alike wondered why Biden was announcing the U.S. shortage during a nationally televised interview that would have been seen by adversaries, which I think is a reasonable thing to be concerned about, okay? Yeah, I would say that's slightly concerning to just let all your adversaries know that you're running out of some of these supplies. So, first off, this lets you know the level of competency within our leadership, which we are all aware of, but is just still concerning considering our current situation. But we also have to understand that these supplies are in short supply. So, that will mean something to us eventually, I guarantee it. Will it affect us right this second? No, because what we're talking about is larger than small arms munitions when it comes to what we concern ourselves with, right? We're not talking about 5.56 or 7.62 by 51 NATO or any of that kind of stuff right this second, but we will be talking about it eventually, which is why we should be tracking this information, because anytime there's a shortage in the supply chain, they have to find where they're going to source it eventually, right? And that's going to affect everything at some point in time if these conflicts continue on for as long as they possibly could. And when we have people in the military circles saying that this could be a decades-long conflict, well, how long until they need some of the stuff that we also need? Protect and preserve. Howdy to you as well. All right. So, let's go ahead and jump into the next part of the story, which is what was on the thumbnail tonight, because I thought this was interesting. Now, this story came out, I believe, today. Yeah, July 10th, okay? And this is from a military strategist that's basically letting us know, like, their thoughts on where we're at by supplying all these munitions and things overseas. U.S. ammunition running perilously low from Biden's efforts to arm Ukraine, military strategist warns. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gabb said it may take decades to recover from all the ammunition provided to fight Russia. Okay, so let's cruise on down here. The Biden administration's plan to arm Ukraine with cluster bombs, which we're still going to talk about, don't worry about that, shows the U.S. is struggling with a dangerously depleted ammunition supply, one military strategist warned. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Darren Gabb joined Sunday Night in America with Trey Gowdy to discuss President Biden's decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine in his latest $800 million weapons package, which is a lot of money that we just seem to always come up with. And then one thing I just want to say really quick is Trey Gowdy, when he was a congressman, he definitely had some, interesting, let's just say, involvement with some of the stuff that was going on within our government. But I don't know if he's got the same plastic surgeon as Michael Jackson or what's going on there, but dude needs to probably chill or he's not going to have a nose sometime soon. That's just me, all right? It throws me off a little bit. Anyway, through my sources, I am being told that it's going to take us 10 to 15 years to recover from everything we've shipped over there, Gabb stated, adding the U.S. is running perilously low on ammunition and is behind in manufacturing 155mm artillery shells and other systems, which, interestingly enough, Biden just told everybody else about as well. Okay. The president's move was met with criticism by both Democratic allies and foreign allies, including British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Spanish Defense Minister Margarita Robles. Gabb described the nature of these weapons, explaining cluster bombs are basically a whole bunch of tiny bombs inside of a larger shell that, when launched over a specific area or targeted to a specific area, the outer shell will explode outward and all those little bomblets will spread all over a large piece of terrain and explode on contact. Now, I don't necessarily think this is the exact analogy to carpet bombing, but is it not carpet bombing? And I thought we had this huge conversation about how, like, carpet bombing was like the thing that we weren't going to allow no matter what when it came to Ukraine back when this all first started. So I'm just a little confused on where we're at when it comes to the strategy moving forward here. We're definitely not in the de-escalation period of talks or diplomacy, are we? So there are currently more than 100 countries that have joined the Convention on Cluster Munitions to ban the use of these weapons, including the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. However, both the U.S. and Ukraine are not signees. Well, thank you, Lord, because now we don't have to worry about those other dumb countries getting in the way of our cluster munitions. So, that is kind of a follow-up to Biden's comments to show that there is some concern about our current munitions supply. And we need these munitions to be able to fight these conflicts, especially if we're going to be talking about, I don't know, China, which is a country we should probably be concerned about. Understand that right now, militarily, we could defeat China, we could defeat Russia, but I don't know about it at the exact same time. And I also, this is just me kind of throwing out some game theory here, that we can do that here. That's part of our job here in the community, is to use game theory to strategize what to expect ahead, right? So understand that the longer these things go on for, the more depleted we become. And every day we're depleting rather than producing, then we are falling further behind, right? And for our adversaries, especially China, every shipment of munitions we send to Ukraine is one less shipment they have to worry about from us going to, I don't know, Taiwan, or having here at home to defend ourselves with. So these are considerations you should definitely be making, because this depletion game is part of the strategy, at least in my opinion. This sponge that's absorbing everything over there in Eastern Europe right now might just be that. That might be what exactly it is they're trying to accomplish, right? So, let's see. Bale Shar says U.S. can't even fight one foe at the moment. And that might be true, you know. And honestly, from my understanding, is that we're still a lot more capable than what people give credit for based on our technology and just the amount of investment we put into the military-industrial complex. We invest more than any other country by far. But still, we are struggling in some departments, obviously. Nick, is buying 1 ounce gold and 1 ounce silver coins a good idea? Well, Nick, I'm not a financial advisor, so I can't actually tell you if that's a good idea or not. What I can say is that my plan for the silver that I own is to use it on the other side of a disaster or something along those lines in order to maintain or preserve some of my wealth in the process. So we'll see how that turns out. But what I will say is, what I find interesting about silver is that if you own 1 ounce of silver, you own more than the rest of the world could technically own. AKA, I think there's like 2.2 billion ounces of silver, and then there's like 8 billion ounces of people. Or 8 billion people, not just ounces of people, because, you know, that's like, that doesn't really add up weight-wise. But there's 8 billion people, only 2.2 billion ounces of silver. So that means if you own 1 ounce, someone out there times, 6 can't own that ounce now. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on to what this whole deal with the cluster munitions is. First off, it's an escalation, and second off, it's being done because of, I don't know, it sounds like, at least in my opinion, a desperate move, because we're running out of other munitions to supply Ukraine with. So we're just kind of digging into what we've got in the stockpile that maybe we're not necessarily using or counting on at the moment, but will still be useful for them in this current situation. And that should concern you as well, because if we're having to dig that far into the stockpile, then where does that end, right? So U.S. sending cluster munitions banned by over 100 nations to Ukraine after months of debate. And I mean, that's something to consider. These munitions are banned by 100 other countries, and then we're just like, yeah, go use them against Russia, right? And there's a reason why these countries ban them. So, Washington, and this is, let's see here, July 8th, so just a couple days ago, right? The U.S. will send cluster munitions to Ukraine as part of a new military aid package, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan confirmed on Friday, following months of debate within the Biden administration about whether to provide Kyiv, however we say it these days, with the controversial weapons banned by over 100 countries, including key U.S. allies. I'm not going to stand up here and say it is easy, Sullivan told reporters. It's a difficult decision. It's a decision we deferred. It's a decision that required a real hard look at the potential harm to civilians. And when we put all of that together, there was a unanimous recommendation from the National Security Team, and President Biden ultimately decided, in consultation with allies and partners and in consultation with members of Congress, to move forward on this strategy. Wow. If you were trying to place the blame on anybody else in a singular sentence, this guy did a really good job, okay? Okay, so President Joe Biden approved the transfer of munitions this week. Officials told CNN. CNN first reported last week that the administration was strongly considering the move, as Ukrainian forces have struggled to make major gains in their counteroffensive against Russia. And now, the interesting part about the cluster munitions, at least from my understanding, is that they have a tendency to not detonate at times, so you might find them later on after a conflict is over, kind of similar to what we see from the German blitzkrieg of London, where we still have munitions from World War II being found in like people's basements and stuff that haven't actually exploded or are still considered dangerous. A lot of that happens with these cluster munitions as well, and so that's a big part of the concern. And I would assume, like, if they're using these cluster munitions, they're on Ukrainian regions based on the fact that they're trying to repel an invading force. So in my opinion, that would almost sound like they are using them on their own soil, which means it might be a problem for them in the future. So it just doesn't sound like the best idea, but maybe that's all we can offer at this point in time, which is concerning. So this is a press release from the Department of Defense that I thought was interesting regarding that, and something that you should keep in mind. And our shortage of ammunition is an important detail. We're going to talk about how it's going to affect us here as individuals later on in the conversation, and then we're also going to talk about what it does to our readiness as a country, because this is concerning to me regarding that. And I will have a video out here in the next couple days discussing some of the other things going on within our military branches that concern me in a way that maybe wasn't my initial thought process regarding it, but now that I've had time to kind of stew on it and develop some more critical thoughts on the entire situation, I'm more concerned now than I was before. So I got to share that with everybody. All right, press release, Department of Defense. Inspector General Robert P. Storch announced today, on July 6th, that the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General, DoD OIG, released the Management Advisory DoD's transportation of ammunition in support of Ukraine. This management advisory addresses the timely transportation of ammunition from European ports to its final destination. This ammunition is part of the Department of Defense support to the government of Ukraine under Presidential Drawdown Authority. Okay, so the DoD OIG recommends that the United States European Command complete a review of logistics support business rules to identify and implement changes necessary to ensure the efficient transfer of ammunition to Ukraine. Additionally, the DoD OIG recommends that USEUCOM, or USOCOM, maybe you could say that. I don't know. We'll just roll with it. Conduct a review to examine and consider implementing other means of rapidly delivering ammunition to Ukraine. IG Storch stated this management advisory was issued as part of the DoD OIG's effort to be agile in reporting on its oversight of the ongoing security assistance to Ukraine and to highlight an issue that the DoD OIG believes warrants prompt attention from the DoD. This advisory is part of a larger oversight project, the evaluation of the U.S. European Command's planning and execution of ground transportation of equipment to support Ukraine from port to transfer locations. Okay. Sorry, but wow, that was a lot to get out. The DoD OIG plans to publish the announced evaluation in the coming months. So the concern here, and this is just something that caught my attention that I wanted to share with everybody, okay? But a review of logistics support business rules to identify and implement changes necessary to ensure the efficient transfer of ammunition to Ukraine. Conduct a review and to examine and consider implementing other means of rapidly delivering ammunition to Ukraine. So not only are we struggling with the production of the ammunition, we're struggling by getting it there in a timely fashion, and they're looking for other ways to get it there or in order to acquire it, and how they're going to review logistics support business rules in order to make sure they can get the changes necessary to get the efficient transfer of ammunition to Ukraine. There's a lot that could be unpacked in those few statements right there, but that does have some of that, let's just call it Defense Authorization Act type stuff in there, where who knows what they're going to implement regarding how they're going to facilitate this ammunition transfer in the future. And it just sounds to me like they're looking for ways to make it more efficient. And how do you make it more efficient? Well, there's a lot of ways you could do it, especially if you're willing to intrude on the civilian market. Some of these companies, some of these ammunition manufacturers, some of these plants and warehouses that are in Europe or even here in the States might not be providing munitions for that region at this point in time, and who knows what they will be, let's just say, coerced into doing down the road, especially because they're looking for these more efficient ways to transfer the ammunition. So it's just something to consider, and this is what we do in these conversations. We look at what's being presented to us, we try to digest the information in a way that can relate it towards preparedness, and then we utilize that information to strategize moving forward. So just in case you're new here, that's kind of the concept of the conversations we have here on this channel. Let's see here. Mike McDonald, Cushion Coffee. I guess if that's how you're rolling, that's how you're rolling. And then we've got Bob from accounting. I keep all my preppers in storage totes and all have the same amount of food and supplies. So if SHTF is really bad, I can get at least one tote and make it a month. That's not a bad way to do it. And of course, having things stashed in multiple locations isn't a terrible idea, and storage totes are great because they're more resistant to things like rodents and whatnot. So good job on you. I appreciate you making that happen, okay? Now, let's see here. I am going to jump into what everyone's concerned about in Europe, because Europe's a little bit worried about this whole conflict and what it's doing to ammunition there. Nick needs a full home battery generator. What's the best? Nick, I can't tell you what's the best because I haven't experienced many whole home generators, in all honesty. I've heard things like Generacs work well, but then in order to get them serviced or to have them worked on, that can be a huge ordeal. I've heard things like daisy chaining, generators or even batteries for like a solar system is a way to do it. But for my personal home generator right now, I'm using an EcoFlow smart home panel hooked up to two EcoFlow Delta Pros. So that's something that you'll all be seeing here in the future. But there's a lot of things that you have to really consider and work out in your power consumption chart, let's just say, that you should put together that will help you make the decision that's more appropriate for you, rather than me just telling you what the best is, because I literally can't tell you, because I haven't used very many, and I also don't know if what I have going on is actually what you need. So apologize for not giving you a better answer. Now, there's an investigation that's going on with the EU right now, and it's about their inability to ramp up production behind acute ammunition shortages in Ukraine, which I found to be interesting because seems to be everybody's concern right now. And this is from, I don't know, today, Monday, July 10th, 2023. All right. Editor's note, this investigation is a collaboration between Kiev, Independent, and partners, including the Investigative Desk, Lighthouse Reports, and Follow the Money, El Diario, Delphi, and Liberation. Key findings. Over a year into Russia's full-scale war, neither Ukraine nor the EU has implemented any solid plans for ammunition production ramp-up. EU member states' governments hardly sign any long-term contracts with producers, while the wait-and-see arms industry is reluctant to take financial risks. Ukraine's arms makers also complain about a lack of state support, yet scale up production under existing capacities anyway. Ukraine uses from 3 to 10 times, depending on the intensity of fighting, less ammunition than Russia does, but its ammunition expenditure is still several times higher than Europe's production rates. National protectionism of member states and the bureaucracy of the EU prevented rapid decision-making to tackle ammunition shortages. The lack of unfired or unified ammunition types in the EU forces soldiers on the front line to alter their ammunition and adapt weapons, which can delay or jeopardize operations. Now, I found that to be very interesting because basically what they're saying is that because of the way Ukraine is having to source their ammunition, source their weapons, source their equipment, they're fighting with all different types of weapons platforms and different calibers and everything else. They're running 7.62 by 39, 5.45 by 39, they got 5.56 NATO, they got 7.62 NATO, they got 300 Blackout. They got a ton of different munition choices. They got 7.62 by 54R. They've got 7.62 by 51 NATO. It's like they don't really have any standardization, and that's making this whole process even more difficult because they're just taking whatever they can get, which means nobody can produce it fast enough, and then they're just having to figure out the best way to use it in the meantime because, hey, we just got a shipment of 7.62 by 51 NATO, and everyone's sitting around with, CZ Bren 2s wondering what they're going to do with it. So this is a very interesting kind of case study as to how logistics win wars, right? Because this is kind of showing that the EU, which not all members are in NATO, but the majority of who we're talking about here are NATO nations, can't keep up with a conflict that's gone on for a year. And a year is not a lot. World War II lasted what? At least for the U.S., we were in it for, I believe, 3 or 4 years, right? Depending on, start and finish of the exact dates. And that's still much longer than 1 year. And here we are now in 2023, and these countries literally cannot keep up with the ammunition production required to get through a conflict that's only been going on for a year and is only between two nations. This is not a good sign for things to come, okay? So when we were doing that poll in the chat, I think people might be relatively accurate in their decisions here. I mean, the U.S., I think the U.S., as on our own, like outside of NATO, I think we can insulate ourselves a little bit better than some of the NATO countries can from some of these issues. Because if we just cut NATO off, we'd be way better off suddenly, right? Because we're the biggest funder of NATO, and we supply them with the most everything when it comes to anything related to the military. But Russia, at 19% is a big part of the vote. A lot of people are saying, well, Russia's been in this conflict for a year as well. They don't have the economy or even the infrastructure that, NATO, backed by the U.S., does. So they're assuming they're going to run out of ammo a little bit faster. But nobody thinks China will. And I think that's going to come into play, and I think you're right about that in all honesty. And we're going to talk about that because we're going to go all around the world tonight, I swear, on my grave. Okay, so let's see here. Steve Reds, good to see you. We've got Michael D saying to stock up on those lunge shucker rounds, and you know what? I mean, we need them sometimes. Now, let's see here. I want to, we could get into this report and really go through it, but I think those key notes were kind of the main thing I wanted to touch on anyway. So let's move on, but this is just telling you, today, we're worried about not having enough ammunition production to get through a conflict that's only been lasting a year. Okay? Now, what's that one country? Remember they did some things and some stuff back in the day, and now they're like kind of messing with the people they were messing with before. Oh yeah, Germany. That's right. Germany. They're very Germanly actually. Germany only has 20,000 high explosive artillery shells left. Report says. Well, first off, I don't have 20,000 high explosive artillery shells, so that sounds like a lot to me. But I guess in a military conflict, especially against like a giant superpower like Russia, that's maybe not very much, okay? This is where things start to get interesting. This is from June 19th, by the way. So I'm just bringing in some relevant information from different timelines to kind of show and drive home the point that, like, ammunition is going to be a problem, no matter how we want to look at it. It just is. Like, we don't have enough to... You can't just decimate an entire country anymore with conventional weapons. Like, you run out at some point. It just happens. And that's what we're kind of learning from this conflict. So we should definitely think about that, especially when applying it towards things in the future. Berlin, June 19th. Germany's armed forces only have around 20,000 high explosive artillery shells left. Magazine Der Spiegel wrote on Monday, citing confidential defense ministry papers prepared to convince the budget committee for the need of urgent purchases. Countries like Germany have rushed to send supplies of 155mm artillery rounds used by howitzers to Ukraine in the wake of its invasion by Russia in February 2022, running down stocks for their own defense. So, this is from June 19th. Almost a month ago, Germany was struggling and concerned about their stockpile of 155mm rounds. And just yesterday, Biden came out and said, we're running low on 155mm rounds. I have a feeling that this is probably the truth. Like, I have a feeling these countries are actually concerned about what they're going to do when they run out. Germany's military, or Germany's, whatever, whoever they are, Herman's military needs to build up an inventory of some 230,000 shells by 2031 to comply with NATO goals to have enough artillery to withstand 30 days of intensive combat. So, according to NATO doctrine, Germany needs 230,000 shells by 2031 so that they can go to war for 30 days of intensive combat. That should also tell you where we are in the sense of this supply. At first, you're like, dang, 20,000 high explosive shells. I mean, that's a lot. What are they freaking out about? And then you see that, well, according to doctrine, they need 230,000 shells just to have 30 days worth of fighting in them. NATO doesn't even have 30 days worth of high-intensity combat, combat readiness ready to go. Like, they don't have a 30 days worth of high explosive artillery shells ready to go. And we're not even in the war yet, technically, right? Now, the U.S., I'm sure we have what we have, because we're just like that. We're kind of, we're a little aggro, right, when it comes to anything, like, military-related. But, Germany doesn't have what they need. The Defense Ministry did not immediately reply to a request for comment. The ministry aims to present the Budget Committee with 9 contracts for the accelerated purchase of artillery and tank ammunition in coming months, Der Spiegel wrote. So, Germany has 10% of what they're supposed to have just to make it through 30 days of conflict. It just doesn't look good, does it? I mean, and here's the thing. One of my concerns, and something that I think we should all be concerned about, just as human beings on the planet, it doesn't even matter where you live. It doesn't matter how close you are to this conflict or how far away you are from some of the more like targeted hot zones or anything like that. One of my biggest concerns related to this is that when these small arms or conventional munitions deplete to the point where there's no real end in sight, like how there's no way to actually see a situation where you don't run out of ammo, what do you do then? You don't just quit the war, right? Like, you don't just give up and say we have to turn around and go back because, like, we ran out of howitzer shells. Not when you have a nuclear stockpile. Not when you have Sarmat-2 missiles chilling in the back. You don't just quit the war because you ran out of conventional arms. You quit the war by ending it in the way you didn't want to have to end it in, but you know what? Everybody used up all your ammo, and you ran out. So you had to use cluster munitions. And then when the cluster munitions ran out, you had to start using napalm. And when the napalm ran out, you had to start using chemical weapons because you ran out of napalm. And when the chemical weapons ran out, you had to use biological weapons. Oh, wait, we already did that. So, like, dang, I guess we just have to go right to nuclear because, well, we're out of other ammo. I hope everyone kind of sees, like, where we're going on this. Like, this is where we are probably heading to if this thing doesn't resolve for these reasons. Like, there's a lot of reasons why we're heading to that. But one of them is the fact that we're just running out of normal ammo. And what are you going to do? Russia's not going to just say, well, we ran out of those guns and it was a good time and we tried our best, but I guess we got to just pull back now, right? And NATO and the US and, of course, backing Ukraine, they're not going to just stop because, like, oh, man, those 155 millimeter shells, couldn't get enough of them, so you win, Russia, sorry. It's just not how it's going to go. So, regarding that, let's bloop on over to Politico, I guess. I source all sorts of media. Don't get on me about who I'm reading or anything. It's just more about the information within. Putin admits Russia doesn't have enough weapons and drones. Now, here's something to think about. Biden accidentally says, oops, we are out of 155 millimeter shells. Putin goes right on national television and is like, we don't have enough of these exact weapons that we need more of, right? So you have to question the concept here. This is from June 13th, right? But just kind of reminding everybody where everyone stands in this ammunition crisis scenario over there in this conflict zone. And, of course, the country that has all these nuclear capabilities is saying they're running low on stuff, too, which you should definitely take with a grain of salt based on the fact that they're just saying it, right? Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned that his armed forces lack the military hardware they need to win the war in Ukraine, while insisting Moscow is ramping up weapons production to fill the gap. Now, I don't doubt that Russia is actually ramping up weapons production. I don't doubt that they have a higher capacity of actually being able to produce these munitions than some of these NATO countries. Now, the US, sure, we can rival Russia when it comes to that. But Germany and Poland and all these other countries in that region, I don't see it. So I don't think Russia's going to run out of ammunition before they do, right? And that's something they should concern themselves with. And there's a secret ingredient that China kind of has like a lock on that we got to talk about here in a little bit, but we'll get to that. So, speaking Tuesday at a meeting of pro-war bloggers in the Kremlin, Putin acknowledged that during the course of the special military operation, it has become clear there are shortages of many things: precision-guided munitions, communications equipment, aircraft, drones, and so on. We have them, but unfortunately we don't have enough of them. Modern anti-tank weapons are needed, and modern tanks are needed. Okay, so at the same time, Putin claimed that there has been a nearly threefold increase in the production of weapons for the battlefield, rising to the tenfold increase for the most in-demand equipment. So Russia is on this escalation of production. And you should be aware of the fact that they are putting their resources into that. And then you have to think about how they're gaming this whole thing right now. So if you're in charge of a country, you're in a conflict, and you know munitions are becoming scarce on both sides of the equation, right? How do you ensure that you are able to keep up with demand and produce the types of weaponry that you need for the future part of this conflict when hopefully maybe your adversaries don't have as much of a capacity to resupply? Well, let's talk about that, okay? So, we have Russia having their troops a little upset. This came out on July 7th, so this is relevant and new. Russian troops say their only money will go to ammo. They refuse to fight. This is from Newsweek. And we know that anything coming out of that region is possibly not necessarily accurate, but we have to at least analyze it the best we can. And this is kind of where I want to drive home the point we were just about to talk about there at the end of the last article. A new video posted to social media on Friday reportedly shows Russian troops in Ukraine proclaiming they will no longer fight on behalf of their country due to lack of payment as well as not being given proper supplies. We have to fight for our own money. All we've got left is to buy our own ammo, a soldier says in the video. War Translated, an independent media project that translates materials about the war in Ukraine into English, shared the video on Twitter. In the clip, which couldn't be independently verified by Newsweek, the soldiers describe losing over 50% of their unit while fighting around the village of Novodevrica. In the company, we had 160 people. Only 40 remain, one man said. The group of soldiers all wore either medical face masks or gator masks, and various men spoke during the video. They claim to have not received any payments from Russia since January and said they've been in combat for 10 months with no leave. Other grievances were also aired in the clip. No artillery support, nothing. No provisions, no water, nothing. Today on July 6th, they want to forcefully deploy us again in Novodevrica, so we will refuse another added, according to War Translated. They went on to describe having no heavy vehicle support and only rifles to fight against Ukraine's tanks. All the items given to us by the army were destroyed by bombs. We have 2 shovels left for the whole company. That's nothing. The clip ended with a troop wearing a mask emblazoned with a skull image saying, "We even blow up our own mines." Okay? The video is the latest example of Russian troops protesting their conditions. Last week, War Translated shared a clip of Storm Company men declaring they refused to go fight on the meat grinder front lines at the Zaporizhia region village of Pryutny. Okay, now, here's the thing that I wanted to take away from this conversation that I think is relevant to this ammunition discussion. First off, they're saying they have to buy their own ammo. Like, they're so depleted in supplies, they have to buy their own ammo. Secondly, okay, they're talking about having to be sent to the meat grinder when it comes to their whole situation of being under-equipped and fighting a superior fighting force in this moment in time, right? So here's what you have to understand. There's a lot of tiers to Russia's military force. And this is like their first tier. And a lot of people were very, let's just say, quick to make judgments about the military equipment that Russia was using at the beginnings of this conflict. Oh, look at this. They have tanks from the 80s. They have trucks from the 80s. They're using all this old equipment, all these old weapons, all this old stuff. But they're sending these let's just say, not combat-hardened units to the front lines, and they're using old equipment and old everything in the beginning of this conflict. And now you kind of maybe start to see why. These first, I guess, tiers of troops that we're seeing out there are being sent to the meat grinder, just like they said they are. They're under-equipped, they have old crap, and it's not necessarily working. But what it is doing is depleting all the munitions of NATO and Ukraine in the process. And although these troops might not be well equipped, you have to understand that if Ukraine is running out of 155 millimeter shells, if Ukraine is running out of like HIMARS missile systems and stuff like that, right? If they're running out of any of the high-tech stuff we've sent them when it comes to drones or even the munitions that the drones are using, if that stuff's being used on this old Cold War era equipment and these soldiers that aren't as well trained or equipped, then the ratio, the value ratio for Russia when it comes to purely being strategic is in their favor, right? Okay, they're using all their best stuff on all our worst stuff. So now, once all this best stuff is used up, and once all these countries have invested in trying to resupply all the best stuff, and it gets used once again, then possibly we've had enough time to A, ramp up our production 3 times, aka 10 times, depending on what type of munitions or equipment they're talking about, through that entire process, and we also still have all the good stuff that we haven't even used yet. So that is something to consider that might be happening here, and especially with all this information surrounding the shortages of supplies and munitions coming to Ukraine, Russia not supplying their current units might be strategic in that regard rather than just incompetency. And I think that might be part of what we're seeing right now. So keep that in mind. Let me know in the chat if that's something that that you guys might agree with, because that's just kind of what I'm feeling going on there based on the fact that sensibly it doesn't seem like it would add up otherwise, right? And sometimes the most simple solution is the right one. Now, I did see, let's see, Shaner. I'm a gem. You wouldn't follow me in a puddle of water. I don't even know what that means, Shaner, so I'll just take that as a compliment. You're right, I am a gem. My mom always said so. So thank you for reinforcing that thought for me. And then we have Prepper Now saying fog of war, and I agree with that. It's pretty dense at this point in time. Nick, no problem. I definitely don't mind helping you. And I think, let's see here. Warrior for Christ says, good evening, brother. Great video on the red dot and explaining why you may not want to put it on a pistol. Well, you're welcome, and that's the thing. Hope everybody understands. My partnership with Midway USA is great because when I acquire things like the Vortex Venom, I'm not required to say anything nice about it or anything like that. It's just, here's the thing that you want to check out and see how it goes, right? And that's how it went. And that just is what it is. So, you know, it's not like I am working directly with Vortex, having them be like, yeah, make sure you say everything good about this, right? No, I just said exactly what I thought. So it worked out pretty well. All right. Let's see. And Luke B says, yes, make all your decisions only after watching Military Arms channel. Correct. So if you are going to run 7.62x51 NATO, then you are correct, according to Tim over there now, right? Hey, look, honestly, you know, I used to run 308 for a lot of the same reasons that he's talking about, and I still would if I was more competent of a shooter. And I just found that I'm better at shooting 5.56 due to my skill level as of right now. we'll see down the road if things change. And of course, my bolt gun 308 is still a tack driver and plenty capable and accurate, so I always have the option. But for the gas guns, I made some switches just based on my own personal capacity. So, and that's, I think, important for us all. We have to be honest with ourselves and our capability, right? Now, we also have a recent depot destruction happening over in Ukraine, okay? Ukraine reportedly destroys huge Russian ammo dump. This is from Saturday, July 8th. So, Ukrainian military has destroyed a large Russian ammunition dump or depot in occupied Luhansk Oblast. Ukrainian journalist Denis Kazansky reported on social media on July 8th. He shared footage from eyewitnesses who filmed the incident. Kazansky claims it occurred in the village of Sokoldisk. Strong detonations are heard even in nearby Krasnodon and Molodolhavardarsk, he claimed. I'm doing my best here. This is far from the front line. Ukraine hasn't struck them there yet before. It seems that the shell hunger in the Russian army will grow a little in the near future. Kazansky also noted that these sorts of explosions at Russian ammo depots had not occurred since 2022, when Ukraine had just begun to use HIMARS to reach the Russian invasion forces' rear. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine have not yet commented on this incident. But this just goes to show that not only are we seeing these munition shortages occur, and not only are we having issues getting the supplies where they're supposed to go and everything related to that, but these countries are very aware of these shortages and supply issues, so they're attacking the places where these stockpiles are in order to exasperate them. So I think these things are important to keep in mind. Now, okay, I got you, Shaner. Shaner says, you love my pathetic skill level on 460 hitting your camera. So I don't know if you've ever set up a tripod in front of you while trying to shoot a 460 revolver through a camera where you're not actually looking at the gun, but you're looking at the camera for the sights to line up, and then you have it in between your arms while you're trying to film it, while you're at a weird angle and holding it at a strange location compared to where you would usually shoot, and then having full power bear loads within that 460 revolver. And then, yeah, it recoils a lot no matter how you hold it because it's a hand cannon, and then it recoil, science, but right, I'll explain physics to you another time, but science actually pushes the gun back, you know, regardless of how strong you are, and then, yeah, it has to go somewhere. And so the camera that was very close to the gun that I was using in order to see through the sights got hit by the gun because it was, like I said, very close. If you were to hold the gun 3 inches from your eye, it would have hit you in the eye. So there you go. I hope that helped you, Shaner, to have a little bit more understanding as how science and things work. But, you know, I'm just kind of seriously annoyed by that assertion that, what, the camera was strapped to my forehead or something? Really? Is that what you thought? Anyway, sorry, but I had to throw a little shade there because that's what you're doing to me. And, yeah, I am good at it. So there you are. Now, we also know that Russia probably needs some of those 155 millimeter shells as well, but luckily they have a friend, and this is something that we definitely need to keep in mind tonight. China has supplied Russia with 152 millimeter Type 66 artillery shells, very similar to 155 millimeter shells that we're using in Ukraine right now. And when I say we, I mean like everyone knows it's us, right? The U.S. is Ukraine at this point in time. We're supplying them, aka us, right? So it is what it is. However you want to say it's fine, okay? China may have delivered a 152 millimeter artillery shell to the Russian army, thus taking a side in the Ukrainian-Russian war, writes Turkish media savunmasanyayist.com, citing Twitter account Ukrainian Front. This media outlet specializes in news about the defense industry, international arms deals, and conflicts around the world. And this information came out on June 28th of this year, okay? The Russian-Ukrainian war, which began with Russia's attacks in February 2022, continues in full violence. In the war, which has been going on for 1.5 years now, is a high-intensity war. Western countries have been providing serious ammunition and technical support to Ukraine. China, one of Russia's biggest allies, kept quiet about the war for a long time. However, images circulating on social media show that China has finally started supplying ammunition to Russia, okay? And that is expected. I would assume that's expected, right? We know that already. But this is to remind you that China has ammo, and they can send it to whoever they want as well. And so China's given Russia the same ammo everyone else is trying to give Ukraine. So I have a feeling China has a pretty good capacity of being able to produce ammunition compared to most European countries. The U.S. is the only other country that can rival China with manufacturing and production capabilities, right? So I don't think Russia's going to run out anytime soon, especially with a friend like China in their backyard, all right? And just so everyone's aware, up to 30,000 ammo is used daily. And that's how you say that properly, just so you know. That's exactly the best way to use that grammar, okay? Now, This is just what I wanted everyone to be aware of. And the parties in the Russian-Ukrainian war spend about 20 to 30,000 pieces of artillery ammunition per day. Much of this artillery ammunition is howitzers. It is known that about 60% to 70% of the above 20 to 30,000 artillery ammunition is used by the Russian army, okay? And yes, as the attacking force, you're always going to have to expend more than the defenders. That's just how it works, right? So, if there was ever some kind of near-peer conflict type situation here in the United States, you would have to expect a lot of artillery shells to be flying, because if that's what's going on there, 20 to 30,000 per day, that's a lot. That's a lot. Okay, now, let's see here. T. Fisher, thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. Luke B says, I got that dog in me. No, I don't, but, I guess I like to explain things sometimes, and if someone requires a less than positive explanation, I'm more than willing to give it, I guess. Does that make sense? Let's see. Benjamin says Glock 19 with a plastic guide rod. Not sure what we're talking about anymore, but I'm still good with it. And you know what? Those plastic guide rods don't just break, so they're fine. That's just my opinion anyway. But yeah, you can upgrade to a steel guide rod if you want, but I honestly don't think it's necessary. That's just how I feel about it. Although PSA does put a steel one in their dagger, which I do find interesting as well. Now, let's see here. China. They're giving Russia ammo. They can make ammo. They got a lot of ammo. Why should we be worried about it? Well, here's the thing. I mean, we also want China ammo. What? Wait, we do? Hold on. Everyone I talk to says not to use Chinese optics or Chinese equipment because it's not good. But the U.S. is heavily reliant on China and Russia for its ammo supply chain? Congress wants to fix that. They should probably fix that. This is from June 8th, 2022. This is a reminder because this is back when the war first started. I don't think this has been fixed yet, but this is interesting for you to be very aware of, okay? This is a big problem when it comes to going to war with China. First off, Russia and China are friends. Second off, we're already at war with Russia basically right now. And third off, if we do go to war with China, they're going to shut off the supply of something we desperately need. The United States has relied, oh, and by the way, while we've been depleting our ammunition supply this entire time to help Ukraine, China is also holding the keys to some of the things we need to reproduce ammunition. It's crazy, right? The United States has relied almost entirely on China and to a lesser extent Russia in recent years to procure a critical mineral that is vital to producing ammunition. The mineral antimony is critical to the defense industrial supply chain and is needed to produce everything from armor-piercing bullets and explosives to nuclear weapons, as well as sundry other military equipment such as night vision goggles. Antimony is now on the front lines of recent congressional efforts to shore up the strategic reserve of rare earth minerals, known as the National Defense Stockpile. The stockpile includes a multitude of other minerals critical to the defense industrial supply chain, such as titanium, tungsten, cobalt, and lithium, but lawmakers expect will become insolvent by fiscal 2025 absent corrective action. The House Armed Services Committee took its first stab at addressing China's grip on the antimony supply chain in draft legislation it released Wednesday. A report accompanying the bill would require the manager of the National Defense Stockpile to brief the committee on the status of antimony by October, while providing a 5-year outlook of these minerals and current future supply chain vulnerabilities. Okay? The committee is concerned about recent geopolitical dynamics with Russia and China and how that could accelerate supply chain disruptions, particularly with antimony. Okay, so, and we know there's other precious metals involved there as well, but this is a big deal. China has the ability to shut off the ammo supply, or at least the ability to produce ammunition, and they know that. And it's more effective to shut it off once you're already low or out, right? So that's something we all keep in mind here in the preparedness community too. I don't want to use all my ammo, and then SHTF happens, and I realize I don't really have any ammo. And when people say, why are you stockpiling ammo? You can't take all that with you. Well, first off, the idea that you're going to take it with you anywhere is probably a bad idea to begin with. I don't want to go anywhere if I don't have to. I've got a pretty good situation going right here. So generally, I'm trying to stay put. If I have to leave, I have to leave, which means I don't care about any of the stuff I'm leaving behind. Think I want to leave my bass guitar and my amp behind just because, I don't want it anymore? No, it's because it means I have to leave no matter what. So we stockpile ammo because at some point the supply chain might be choked off. Because at some point we might not have access to it any longer. Because at some point these psychos in the government might try to ban it or who knows what else, right? So We need it in case we need to use it, and we also need it so that we can continually train even during times where it's no longer available or accessible. If I have 400 rounds of ammunition and the entire supply gets shut off, I'm not going to feel very good about shooting any of that ammunition until I can get more. But things might happen in between that time and the time where you're able to get more where you might need to use that ammunition. And if you're not skilled or well trained by that point in time because you weren't able to use your ammunition, how's that going to go for you? So these are just considerations to make when it comes to planning, but this is something you should definitely keep in mind. If we go into conflict with China, they can shut off the supply of, maybe not directly ammunition, but they can shut off the supply of rare earth minerals that we need in order to bolster our defenses, right? So let's talk about some other things happening with China, because they are also now on the menu. I do like Chinese food, so that works for me. China accuses the U.S. of turning Taiwan into a powder keg with its latest sales of military equipment. This is from July 5th. China's defense ministry is accusing the United States of turning of Taiwan into a powder keg with its latest sales of military equipment to the self-governing island democracy. Let's see here. We just sold $440 million in military equipment to Taiwan. The U.S. State Department approved of the sale of 30mm ammunition and related equipment, along with spare parts for Taiwan's vehicles, small arms, combat weapon systems, and logistical support items. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Colonel Tan Kai-fei responded that the U.S. ignores China's core concerns, crudely interferes in China's internal affairs, and deliberately escalates tensions across the Taiwan Strait. China claims Taiwan as its own territory to be conquered by force if necessary, and Tan said stern representations had been lodged with the U.S. This is tantamount to accelerating the transformation of Taiwan into a powder keg and pushing the Taiwanese people into the abyss of disaster, he said in a statement on the ministry's website. Using force to seek independence is wishful thinking and is doomed to failure, he said, using standard Chinese terminology, adding that the People's Liberation Army was always ready and would maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. maintains a one-China policy under which it does not recognize Taiwan's formal independence and has no formal diplomatic relations with the island in deference to Beijing. Nonetheless, U.S. law requires a credible defense for Taiwan and the U.S. to treat all threats to the island as matters of grave concern. Okay, so we're sending ammo to Taiwan as well. So not only are we running low on 155mm shells, now we're sending 30mm shells to Taiwan and all the equipment and everything else they need for their vehicles, small arms, and combat weapon systems. So we're spreading ourselves pretty thin if we're going to keep just dumping munitions all over the place. Not to mention we're provoking China when it comes to those munitions. By sending them to Taiwan, we're making China have to consider what they should do in regards to allowing us to arm their potential adversaries here in the near future. It's easier to take over your own island if the people there aren't as well armed. And if we keep sending them better and better equipment and munitions, then it's going to be harder for China to deal with in the future, which A, might make them make a move sooner than later, and B, might, make them feel like they have to use more force than they originally thought. So either way, we're escalating the scenario by pushing their timeline up, because every shipment of equipment that we send to Taiwan is one more shipment of equipment China has to deal with when they decide to invade. So these are just considerations to make. And also, yes, it's another shipment of equipment that we no longer have here in the U.S. And according to Joe Biden, we're running low on ammo. Now, let's see here. Pony Girl. At this point, I don't care who makes it. If I need it, I'm going to get it now before I can't. Just saying. Okay. Now, I understand that, and I think that we, as a preparedness community, it's good for us to try our best to buy American products when we can. It's good for us to support American manufacturing, but we also need to get the things that we need. And when it comes to solar generators and solar backup power systems, the majority of them are made in China. That's just the truth. Solar panels, the majority are made in China, right? And affordability generally comes from China. If you want a good optic for your rifle, but you can't afford an EOTech or a Night Force or a Loophole, right? Primary Arms does make pretty good optics, but they're also going to be made in China if they're their more budget-friendly offerings. So these are all considerations you have to make, and it's just do your best. But this day and age, no matter what you do, something in your room right now is made in China. The thing you're watching this live stream on is made in China. Like, that's just how it works. We've globalized to the point where that's just an inevitability. But try where you can, right? There are a lot of good brands and manufacturers out there that make their stuff in the USA. So that is something that I think is good to support as well. Now, let's go ahead and jump over here to talk about how Taiwan is, well, first off, how much ammo that they're giving their soldiers, which I found to be interesting, but also how they're emulating Ukraine based on what they're planning for when it comes to China invading. Okay, Ukrainian strategy has become a model. Taiwanese beef up military to face China threat. Now this is from July 9th. Okay, so this is all new stuff. There's a lot of talk about ammunition, like a lot, and I thought it was relevant for us to talk about tonight because why are we so worried about it? Well, this is why. For many people in Taiwan, the threat of conflict with China is a distant prospect that has been lingering in the air for some 7 decades. Concern in the West that the Chinese Communist Party, led by Xi Jinping in Beijing, is moving ever closer towards attempting to realize its goal of reunifying China and Taiwan by force if necessary, can seem hysterical. Okay? Now, first off, this is quite a photo. A little different than what we see in the United States these days anyway, isn't it? Now, here's where I really thought it was interesting, okay? Okay. We'll start up here, just so you guys can see this fun little comic that I have no idea what it says. But the training details should be upgraded, not the time spent, says Li Hao-lun, an official in Kinmen for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. The training details are from the past, but today we're talking about a modern war. Interesting. Enoch Wu, a former Special Forces soldier and the founder of Forward Alliance, a defense think tank that runs civil defense training courses, the public is concerned that compulsory service would be extended without substantive reform. Okay, now listen to this. Kurlekis notes that the Defense Ministry's promise to allocate every conscript 800 rounds of ammunition is nowhere near enough to develop the required proficiency. As part of a campaign to promote the idea of national service, in April the ministry published a manga-style comic strip about a conscript who learns about the values of military training and the existential threats facing Taiwan. Now, Taiwan needs more ammo. We're sending it. And as of right now, the Defense Ministry is only promising each conscript 800 rounds of ammunition for training. That's not a lot. And in all honesty, how many of us here in this chat right now at least have that bare minimum of 800 rounds that we can go shoot to train to get to the required proficiency that Taiwan thinks its conscripts need in order to fight off a superpower like China? This is something you should definitely be keeping in mind. They're trying to get ready for this, and they know that even at 800 rounds of ammo worth of training for their conscripts, they're not going to be prepared for it. I think that's something worth considering, or at least thinking about, okay? Now, let me jump here in the chat for a second. Sean Romero, what a joke. I'm not sure what we're talking about, Sean, but you're probably right. Let's see here. A little skiolism. You don't have 1/50th enough ammo. Sell your car and max out your credit card tonight. You always come in with the best sarcasm. I'm glad you trained so hard with that. It's much appreciated. It keeps me on my toes. And then MacGyver Preppin says, better get good quick, right? Misfit 138. Magic, ever thought about taking MMA or martial arts training? I have thought about it, and I have done it before, and I have decent amounts of training within the martial arts realm. So something I might, pick up again down the road when I have more access to it, because where I live now doesn't really provide simple access to martial arts training, but I have a pretty decent background in martial arts, in all honesty. So I'm not overly concerned with my ability to take care of myself in the sense of like a hand-to-hand scenario. And most of what I trained was ground fighting, right? So grappling, and I think that we all know that that's probably where most fights are going to end up. So doing what I can when it comes to that, and I try to keep up on that by being in good physical fitness, in all honesty. That's kind of how I try to maintain some of that. Now, Samson J. Pedrosa says, well, I just lost it. Train with 22 long rifle. Cheap, 800 rounds, less than $100. You know what? That's a good idea. I just want you to know that training with it's not quite the same. It just isn't. So you have to balance, right? If you've only ever shot 22 and then you have a 5.56 laying in the safe that you're like, well, I don't need to train with it because I got a 22 I train with all the time. It's just not the same, right? So we gotta balance and keep things, making sense when it comes to spending our time with what we're going to actually plan on using. So let's see here. Ewok Jerky, thanks for the super chat. I appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for letting everyone know to click the like button. I think it's a good idea because we're supposed to do those things. And I'm really bad about saying it or talking about it here in the live chats because I just get carried away on all this stuff, man. I just do. I don't I don't know yet. It's just weird, you know? So, let's move on to what we should be concerned about relating some of this. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but about a year ago, there was a little bit of concern for the prepared citizen when it came to ammunition. I guarantee you this is not off the table. Okay? Biden might ban government 5.56 ammo sales. Now, you remember this from a year ago. Biden might ban government-produced 5.56 ammo sales. This will reduce supply and help Ammo Inc. via less competition. This is more of like a bull, or not, I've just said bull because I see the bull here. This is more of like a stock market related thing, considering companies like Ammo Incorporated. But the idea here was that Biden was trying to ban Lake City from producing ammo or selling ammo to the civilian market. As of right now, Lake City produces 5.56 ammo for the military, and then any surplus that they produce is allowed to be sold on the civilian market. And Biden was trying to basically tell them they weren't allowed to do that anymore. Now, a lot of the concern there was, gun control and them trying to backdoor us using ammunition as a weapon, but there's also the chance that they actually needed that ammo for anticipation of entering this conflict. So there's a lot of things that could happen there, but understand that it'd be very easy for our current executive branch to try to say they need these munitions for other purposes and that the civilian market doesn't need them as much as the military or as much as some of these foreign countries like Ukraine. So this could easily come up once again, all right? And understand that Biden backed out of this at like the last second, but this was something that was definitely on the docket, okay? The National Shooting Sports Foundation has been in contact with officials at Winchester Ammunition regarding the Biden administration's consideration of halting sales of excess M855 SS109 ammunition. Winchester was informed that the government is considering restricting the manufacturing and commercial sale of legal ammunition produced at the Lake City, Missouri facility. This restrictive action would immediately jeopardize 400 to 500 jobs, significantly reduce the availability of ammunition in the marketplace, and put the nation's warfighting readiness at risk. Both NSSF and Winchester strongly oppose this action, okay? So, they backed off of this and they decided not to go through with it, but it's still available to them as something in their toolbox, right? And understand that Ammo Inc., and this could be something other companies might be compelled to do at some point, and when I say compelled, I guess I more mean coerced, but Ammo Inc. actually donated 1 million rounds of ammunition to Ukraine when this all first started. And we know Ukraine is saying that they need more, right? And so if at any point we find ourselves in a hot conflict, right? If we get into a war with China, if we get pulled into this Russian conflict via NATO, right? We actually absorb Ukraine into NATO or whatever happens over there, that Article 5 gets enacted, then suddenly these companies might not just be told by the government they can't sell ammunition on the civilian market any longer, but these companies might just start giving ammunition to the government, to the Army, the military, the Marines, the Navy, everybody else who uses it in order to support the conflict, right? To support the war effort. And what does that do to the market for us? What does that do to the availability for us? What does that do in general when it comes to sourcing ammunition? So just so you're aware, this is a document from Ukraine that was sent to Ammo Incorporated. To Fred Wagenhals, Chairman and CEO of Ammo Inc. USA. Let's see, this is from March 18th, 2022. Company's donation of 1 million rounds of ammunition to the armed forces of Ukraine. And it is my honor to thank the United States of America's Ammo Incorporated for their donation to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. March 18th, 2022. The donation will ensure that our country and military will continue its fight for freedom. It is an honor to accept such a beneficial donation. Thank you and the American people for all the support and caring. Sincerely, Oleski Reznikov. Okay? So, that is, both of those options are just like a sample as to what could come in the future. There's no reason why the Biden administration wouldn't just shut off that Lake City plan if they decide to. They backed off for political reasons, and they backed off because they didn't want to have to deal with the fallout of it all at that moment. But if they decide they want to do it, it won't be hard for them to do. The easiest way for them to accomplish the similar goal is to enter the conflict. And at that point in time, it'll be hard for the average person, especially someone who's not into preparedness or firearms or things of that nature. It'll be hard for them to argue with the government's need for the ammunition. Why would civilians need ammo? We need to come together and do our part and make sure the military has what they need. So these crazy gun nuts need to stop complaining about the fact that they no longer have access to this ammunition because it needs to go to the war front. This is where it all needs to be going. And I thought they were patriotic. I thought they wanted to support America. I thought that they understood when we needed to come together. We just needed to stop worrying about our own personal needs and start thinking about the country as a whole, right? So that is what I would expect if we do publicly enter this conflict. Not to mention, I expect some of these ammo manufacturers to decide to gear some of their production towards supporting the military rather than selling to the civilian market. And of course, with some of these companies, you're going to have the military getting first dibs on anything that they decide they need. Defense Authorization Act is very powerful in that regard. And when you have companies like, for example, Sig Sauer, who already has these military contracts for handguns and rifles, well, guess what? They also make ammunition, and they also make electro-optics, and they also make, right? So you can see how a company that's already in bed with the military might just get completely pulled away. And let's be honest, they're turning into Weyland-Yutani overnight anyway. So, I have already assimilated with Sig, but like they will be the Borg eventually. So I guess I'll be used to it by that time. But this is easily happening. And I just want everyone to be aware of it. Like, as a country, we're low on ammo, which means our national security is at risk. As a entity in NATO, we're low on ammo, which means that if a bad actor decides to get a little crazy in another part of the world, how do we respond? And when I say that, I guess I just completely mean China. We are dependent on China for things like antimony that we can't just produce, right? So this is a difficult situation. Well, that's weird. Hold on, can everyone still hear me? Oh, this is lovely. If you can still hear me, let me know in the chat, please. But I I think this has gotten pretty interesting. Baal Shar says yes. So listen, I think that I forgot to plug my camera in, and now it is no longer going. So let's just say we're already at the hour mark. I think we can call it a night. But listen, let me know in the chat if you think we're going to be lost on Sideways Prepper. That's right, Lefty GR, you got me. If you think we're going to be struggling when it comes to ammunition in the future, let me know in the chat. And if you are concerned about us depleting ourselves in regards to sending all of our munitions and everything we need to Ukraine, let me know. Because honestly, I think that is a huge issue. I think we are on our way to depleting ourselves into oblivion. And I think that we need to just hold on to our butts. And that's just where we're at. Yeah, I'm glad everyone likes the cat. I like the cat too. So, but thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for dealing with the fact that my camera shut off. But you know what? I still like all of you, and I'm glad you still like me. If there's anything else you need from me, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper. And yes, I even waved my arms.